Hi everyone, here we are on our second video about the respiratory system. And in this video, we're going to talk mostly about the lower respiratory tract. And so remember when we go through the upper respiratory tract, we get the air to the larynx. And then below that, remember the larynx is continuous with the trachea. And so the trachea is the beginning of the lower respiratory tract. It says here it's commonly called the windpipe. And so you are familiar with the trachea. It lays anterior to the esophagus, so you can actually touch the trachea. And there's some interesting things going on in the trachea. I kind of like this picture. This down here, it's what it would look like on a slide under your microscopes that you would use in a lab like ours. And here's a cartoon of the same thing, kind of highlighting it. But what you can see in this with this image is, first of all, the cells lining the trachea. Remember we said when we talked about tissues, we said all surfaces are covered with epithelium or epithelial tissues. And remember we said epithelial cells are described by their size, by their shape, and the number of layers. So we can see some epithelial tissue here. And one interesting thing in the trachea is that they're covered with cilia. So if you were able to put your finger down and touch the inside surface of your trachea, which I would not recommend, that wouldn't feel very good, there's actually cilia on that surface. And remember, these are microscopic hair-like structures, and they actually move. They're kind of moving like that, kind of in a wave-like fashion. And on the surface of those cilia is mucus. And you can see here these cells that some people thought that they kind of look like wine glasses or goblets, like there's, the bigger part and the smaller part. And so they called them goblet cells. And the goblet cells actually make mucus and secrete it onto the surface. So what happens is our trachea is lined with this mucus, and right underneath there's cilia that are moving that. And so as you breathe in, you can imagine that there's all sorts of dust and other particles that come in with the air. And so the trachea are pushing mucus up this way. So the dust gets trapped on the mucus, and then the cilia push the dust up, and you actually end up swallowing. Let me just go back to another picture. If we look right here, if you've got your air, so here's the trachea, it's lined with cilia and mucus. And so the cilia are going to push that mucus with dust in it up, and you're going to, before it even gets into your throat area, into your mouth part of your throat, your oral pharynx, it's going to go from here and going to go bloop right into your esophagus. So that's happening all day long, that these cilia are pushing that up. Now, people that smoke, actually their cilia are paralyzed. And so they get a buildup of mucus and dust inside the trachea, and that contributes to the smoker's cough, that in the morning that is most notable. And a lot of people do a lot of coughing in the morning. I kind of have this memory as a child of being in bed in the morning and hearing my mom coughing in the kitchen. She was a smoker. And it was always kind of the morning ritual to make up for those cilia that aren't working properly. So, here's they tell you if the cilia is blocked, if the trachea is blocked by, you swallowed something or there's some kind of injury, we've heard of these procedure called tracheostomy. And so you actually put a little hole in the trachea way down here, and you can stick, if you open it up, you can stop the air moving in from the nose and the mouth and let the air go right through there. So as you inhale, the air would be pulled in through here, and that would be a life-saving procedure. Hopefully, you never have to have that done. So the trachea branches once it gets into, again, let's go see if we can see a picture. The trachea is going to branch into two major branches, and they're still kind of cartilaginous, hard tubes, and these are called the bronchi. And then the bronchi are going to branch into smaller tubes called the bronchioles. And then those bronchioles are going to end in alveoli. So here we have the bronchus, or a single one is bronchus, but this has branched into a bronchiole, a smaller bronchi. And then ultimately you're going to end in these little air sacs. And so, and those air sacs are called alveoli. So when you actually see lung tissue, most of what you're seeing are alveoli, just you know, a million of these little air sacs. Now notice that these air sacs are surrounded by capillaries, and that should make sense because ultimately air is pulled into these air sacs, these alveoli, and these are really thin walls. Remember we said surfaces have epithelial tissue. So here's some simple squamous epithelium making up the walls of these alveoli. Now these are microscopic. They make the lungs kind of look like a very spongy material. And when the air is pulled into here, the oxygen diffuses into the blood and CO2 diffuses out of the blood. So we can exhale the carbon dioxide and we can bring the oxygen containing blood to the rest of the cells in the body. So it talks a little bit about here that the lungs are cone shaped. They're in the thoracic cavity, the chest cavity. And the right lung has 3 lobes or 3 parts, and the left lung just has 2. Let's go back to that picture in, what is it, section 1.1. If we look over here, here's the right lung. It's got 3 lobes, 1, 2, 3, and the left lung has 2. And the reason for that is in this space right here would be the heart. So the heart's taking up part of the space of the left lung. Now you can see that these lobes of the lungs, they're separate sections. And it's actually a good model because what happens is if you get an infection or a cancer in one lobe, it because it's compartmentalized from the others, it might not spread as easily to the others. So, an infection in this lobe might be less likely to go into the others. So that compartmentalization of the lungs is really helpful. Oops. Back to section 10.3. Let's see what we got. We got the lungs. I always like this one. It says if you take all the alveoli in the lungs, I'd say the lungs have about 300 million alveoli. And if you laid them, these little air sacs, if you flattened them out and laid them all down, you'd have the size of a tennis court in your lungs. So lots of surface area in order to get that exchange of oxygen and we'll say gas and the cardiovascular system. This is an interesting article on artificial lungs, so you might want to look at that. The next section, we're going to talk about mechanism of breathing, and I think I'll wait for the next video.